The night of June 14, 2017 started like any other night in West London. Families were settling down for bed in the tall Grenfell Tower apartment building. Children were being tucked into their beds while parents watched television or prepared for the next working day. Nobody could have imagined that this ordinary Tuesday evening would become one of the most tragic nights in London's recent history. Around midnight, something went terribly wrong on the fourth floor of the building. A small fire started in one of the apartments, but instead of staying contained, it began spreading with frightening speed. The flames moved up the outside of the building like a deadly ladder, climbing higher and higher with each passing minute. The fire moved so fast that many residents woke up to find thick black smoke already filling their hallways. Panic spread through the building as quickly as the flames themselves. Families grabbed their children and ran toward the stairwells, only to find them filled with choking smoke. Some people tried to escape by going up to the roof, hoping for rescue from helicopters. Others were trapped in their apartments with no way out. The emergency telephone operators were overwhelmed with desperate calls from people begging for help. Outside on the street, hundreds of neighbors and passers-by gathered to watch in horror as the 24-story building turned into a towering inferno. People could see others trapped at windows waving towels and flashlights trying to signal for help. Some residents threw their children from windows, hoping that people below might catch them. The sounds of sirens filled the air as fire trucks and ambulances rushed to the scene, but the fire was spreading faster than anyone could control. The local fire department had never dealt with anything like this before. Their ladders could not reach the higher floors, and the water from their hoses seemed powerless against the massive flames. Firefighters risked their own lives, climbing up the dark, smoky stairwells to rescue as many people as possible. Many of these brave men and women would later need medical treatment for smoke inhalation and burns, but they kept going back into the building again and again. By dawn the next morning, the fire had finally been brought under control, but the damage was devastating. The once proud apartment building now stood as a blackened skeleton against the London sky. 72 people had lost their lives, including entire families who had been sleeping peacefully just hours before. Young children, elderly grandparents, and working parents were all gone forever. The survivors who had managed to escape found themselves standing on the streets with nothing but their pajamas and whatever they had grabbed while running for their lives. They had lost everything they owned. Photo albums, wedding rings, children, toys, furniture, clothes, and all the small treasures that make a house a home were now just ashes. Many survivors were injured with burns, cuts, and serious damage to their lungs from breathing smoke. The local community center quickly filled with displaced families who had nowhere else to go. Volunteers brought blankets, food, and water, but there was not enough space or supplies for everyone who needed help. Children were crying for toys and comfort items that no longer existed. Parents tried to explain to their young ones why they could not go home anymore. News reporters and camera crews arrived from around the world to cover the story. The images of the burned building were broadcast globally, but many survivors felt that the media was more interested in dramatic pictures than in understanding their real needs. Government officials also arrived to survey the damage and make statements to the press, but their visits felt brief and impersonal. The Grenfell community felt abandoned during those first dark days after the fire. They were grieving for lost friends and neighbors, while also facing the practical challenges of finding new places to live, work, and send their children to school. Many residents were angry about the cause of the fire and demanded answers about why it had spread so quickly. They felt that their voices were not being heard by the people in power who could help them. As the sun set on that first day after the tragedy, the survivors looked up at the burned shell of their former home and wondered if anyone with real influence would ever truly understand their suffering or help them rebuild their shattered lives. 3 days had passed since the terrible fire, and the Grenfell community was still in shock. People wandered around the temporary shelters looking lost and confused. Many survivors had not slept properly since that awful night. They kept waking up thinking they could smell smoke or hear the sound of breaking glass. The children were especially frightened, and many refused to leave their parents, even for a few minutes. The government officials who had visited the area seemed to rush through their appointments. They would arrive with large groups of security guards and photographers, take a few pictures, shake some hands, and then leave quickly. The survivors felt like they were just part of a photo opportunity rather than real people who needed genuine help and support. On the morning of June 17th, something different happened. A small group of cars arrived at the community center, but without the usual fanfare and media circus. Prince William stepped out of one of the vehicles wearing simple casual clothes instead of his formal royal outfits. He had come without a big security team and without news cameras following his every move. The first person he met was Mrs. Sarah Johnson, an elderly woman who had lost her apartment and most of her belongings in the fire. She was sitting alone on a bench outside the community center, looking very sad and tired. Instead of walking past her to meet with officials, Prince William approached her directly and sat down beside her on the bench. Mrs. Johnson was surprised that someone so important would want to talk to her. She began telling him about her life in the building and how she had lived there for over 20 years. She talked about her neighbors who had become like family to her and how some of them had not survived the fire. As she spoke, tears began rolling down her cheeks. Prince William did not try to stop her crying or tell her that everything would be okay. Instead, he listened carefully to every word she said. He asked questions about her neighbors and wanted to know their names and what they had been like as people. When Mrs. Johnson mentioned that she missed her neighbor, Mr. Patel, who used to bring her homemade curry, Prince William smiled and said that Mr. Patel sounded like a wonderful man. Word spread quickly through the community center that Prince William was there and that he was actually talking to regular people. Children began gathering around him, but instead of being formal or distant, he got down on their level. He sat on the floor with them and asked about their favorite games and what they missed most about their old homes. 8-year-old Amara showed him a small stuffed elephant that she had managed to save from the fire. The elephant was dirty and had a torn ear, but it was her most precious possession. Prince William examined the elephant carefully and told Amara that it must be very special to have survived such a scary experience. He said that brave elephants like hers were good at protecting little girls. Throughout the day, Prince William moved through the community center talking to anyone who wanted to speak with him. He helped volunteers serve lunch to the families. He carried boxes of donated clothes and toys. He even helped change the diaper of a baby whose mother was feeling overwhelmed. The other volunteers were amazed to see a member of the royal family doing such ordinary tasks without complaining. What impressed people most was that Prince William remembered details about the conversations he had with different families. When he spoke to Mr. Ahmed, who was worried about finding a new mosque to attend, Prince William asked if he preferred morning or evening prayers. When he met teenage Maya, who was concerned about missing her final school exams, he asked what subjects she was studying and whether she wanted to go to university. By the end of that first day, the atmosphere in the community center had changed. People were talking more with each other instead of sitting in silent grief. Children were playing games again instead of clinging to their parents. The volunteers noticed that families seemed more hopeful and less afraid than they had been since the fire. As Prince William prepared to leave that evening, many people thanked him for coming, but he told them that he should be thanking them for sharing their stories with him. He promised that this would not be his only visit and that he would return soon to see how everyone was doing. This promise meant more to the Grenfell community than any official statement or government announcement they had heard. Prince William kept his promise to return to Grenfell. Over the next few weeks, he came back again and again. Each visit was different, but his commitment never changed. He would arrive early in the morning and stay until late in the evening, working alongside the community volunteers and local organizations who were trying to help the survivors. Unlike other important visitors who came for quick photo sessions, Prince William made it clear that he was there for the long term. He did not just make speeches about feeling sorry for people. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and got involved in the actual work that needed to be done. He helped sort through donated clothes and toys. He assisted with serving meals to hungry families. He even helped move furniture into the temporary housing units that were being set up for displaced residents. During one of his visits, Prince William spent an entire afternoon with a group of teenagers who had lost their homes in the fire. These young people were angry and frustrated. They felt like society had failed them, and that nobody in power really cared about their problems. Some of them had been getting into trouble at school or with the police because they did not know how to deal with their emotions. Instead of lecturing these teenagers about staying positive or behaving better, Prince William sat down with them and listened to their anger. He did not try to convince them that their feelings were wrong. Instead, he told them that it was completely normal to feel angry after experiencing something so terrible. He said that their voices mattered and that they had every right to demand better treatment from the government and other authorities. The teenagers were surprised by his honesty. They had expected him to give them the same kind of empty speeches they had heard from other officials. But Prince William talked to them like they were real people with valid concerns rather than problems that needed to be fixed. By the end of the afternoon, these same angry teenagers were helping him organize supplies for other families and offering to volunteer at the community center. What made Prince William different from other visitors was his attention to personal details. He made an effort to learn people's names and remember their individual stories. When he returned for his next visit, he would ask specific questions that showed he had been thinking about them since his last trip. He would ask Mrs. Chen how her son was adjusting to his new school, or inquire about whether Mr. Williams had found a safe place for his cat to stay. These small gestures meant everything to people who felt forgotten by the rest of society. Prince William showed them that they were not just statistics or victims, but real individuals with unique lives and concerns. He remembered that little Fatima was learning to play the violin and asked to hear about her progress. He recalled that Mr. Thompson had been worried about his elderly mother and checked to see if she was getting the medical care she needed. Prince William also made sure to spend time with the volunteers who were working so hard to help the Grenfell families. Many of these volunteers were from the local community and had been working without pay for weeks to provide food, clothing, and emotional support to the survivors. They were exhausted and stressed, but felt like they could not stop helping because the need was so great. The prince recognized how important these volunteers were and made sure to thank them personally for their efforts. He brought them coffee and sandwiches while they worked. He listened to their concerns about not having enough resources or support from the government. He even helped them write letters to local politicians asking for more funding and assistance for their programs. One evening, Prince William stayed late to help clean up after a community dinner. While washing dishes with a group of volunteer women, he listened to them talk about their own fears and worries. Some of them lived in similar apartment buildings and were scared that the same thing could happen to their homes. Others were struggling financially because they had been spending their own money to buy supplies for the Grenfell families. Prince William did not make empty promises about fixing all their problems, but he assured them that their concerns were being heard by people who could make a difference. He took notes about the specific issues they raised and promised to share this information with government officials and housing authorities. More importantly, he treated these volunteer women as experts who understood the community needs better than any outside authority. The impact of Prince William's consistent presence began to show in many ways. Families who had been isolated and depressed started participating more in community activities. Children who had been having nightmares and behavioral problems began to improve as they felt more secure and hopeful about the future. Even the teenagers who had been angry and rebellious started taking leadership roles in helping other young people cope with their trauma. The community center became a place of healing rather than just a place for emergency assistance. People gathered there not only to receive help, but also to offer support to each other. Prince William's example of treating everyone with dignity and respect inspired others to do the same. The Grenfell community began to rediscover its own strength and resilience. The Grenfell community was one of the most diverse neighborhoods in London. People from many different countries and cultures had made their homes in the tall apartment building. There were families from Somalia, Ethiopia, Morocco, Lebanon, and many other places around the world. Some residents had lived in London for decades, while others were newer immigrants still learning English and adjusting to British life. This diversity created some challenges when it came to helping everyone after the fire. Some elderly residents were more comfortable speaking in their native languages rather than English, Others had different cultural customs about accepting help from strangers or interacting with government officials. Many people were suspicious of authority figures because of difficult experiences in their home countries. Prince William seemed to understand these challenges instinctively. Instead of expecting everyone to adapt to his way of communicating, he made efforts to connect with people according to their own cultural backgrounds and comfort levels. He learned basic greetings in Arabic, Somali Spanish, and other languages, so he could welcome people in words they understood from childhood. When Prince William visited the temporary mosque that had been set up for Muslim families who had lost their regular place of worship, he showed deep respect for their religious customs. He removed his shoes before entering and sat on the floor with the men during their evening tea time. He listened as they explained their concerns about finding halal food for their families and locating a permanent mosque where their children could continue their religious education. The prince did not pretend to be an expert on Islam, but he asked thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest in understanding their faith. When the imam spoke about the importance of community support during times of hardship, Prince William nodded and said that all religions seemed to share this beautiful value. His respectful attitude helped build trust with families who had initially been hesitant to accept help from outsiders. During a visit to the community center, Prince William joined a traditional Eritrean coffee ceremony that was being held by a group of women from that country. The ceremony involved roasting green coffee beans over a small flame and then brewing the coffee in a special pot while saying prayers of gratitude. The women invited Prince William to participate not because he was royalty, but because he had shown genuine interest in learning about their customs. As Prince William sat in the circle with these women, they explained that the coffee ceremony was a way of creating family bonds and sharing important news with the community. They told him that they had been holding these ceremonies in the Grenfell building before the fire, and that continuing the tradition in the temporary shelter helped them feel more at home. Prince William said he felt honored to be included in something so meaningful to their culture. Children from many different backgrounds seemed especially drawn to Prince William. Language barriers did not seem to matter much with the younger ones who communicated through smiles, games, and shared activities. 6-year-old Amara, who had been having terrible nightmares since the fire, barely spoke to adults anymore. But when Prince William sat down with crayons and paper and started drawing pictures with her, she began to open up. Part 5. Standing up for the community. As weeks turned into months after the Grenfell fire, Prince William realized that his role needed to go beyond just providing comfort and emotional support to the survivors. The community was facing serious practical problems that required action from government officials and housing authorities. Many families were still living in temporary accommodations that were meant to be short-term solutions. Children were struggling in new schools far from their friends and familiar neighborhoods. The process of finding permanent housing for displaced families was moving very slowly. Government officials kept making promises about quick solutions, but weeks would pass without any real progress. Some families were being offered apartments in distant parts of London that would separate them from their support networks and community connections. Others were given housing options that were unsuitable for their family sizes or special needs. Prince William began using his position and influence to put pressure on the right people to speed up the housing process. He attended private meetings with housing ministers and local council leaders. During these meetings, he did not just make polite requests for help. Instead, he presented detailed information about specific families and their urgent needs. He had taken the time to learn about individual cases so he could advocate effectively for real people rather than just talking about problems in general terms. When government officials tried to give Prince William vague promises about eventual solutions, he pushed them for specific timelines and concrete commitments. He asked direct questions about why certain families had been waiting so long for permanent housing and what exactly was causing the delays. His persistent questioning made it clear that the royal family was paying close attention to how the Grenfell situation was being handled. One evening, there was a particularly tense community meeting at the local town hall. Angry residents had come to demand answers from local officials about the slow progress in rehousing families and investigating the cause of the fire. The meeting room was packed with frustrated survivors who had been waiting months for basic answers about what had happened to their homes and neighbors. The local officials seemed overwhelmed and defensive when residents began shouting questions and accusations. Some people were so angry that they were interrupting each other, and the meeting was becoming chaotic rather than productive. The officials looked like they wanted to end the meeting early and leave without addressing the community's concerns. Prince William had been sitting quietly in the back of the room listening to the exchanges. When the tension reached a breaking point, he stood up and asked if he could say something. The room became quiet as people turned to listen to him. Instead of taking sides or making excuses, he acknowledged the legitimate frustration that residents were feeling, while also encouraging everyone to work together toward solutions. He spoke directly to the government officials and said that the people of Grenfell deserved honest answers and prompt action. He reminded them that these were not just housing statistics, but real families who had already suffered tremendous losses and needed their help urgently. At the same time, he asked the residents to give the officials a chance to respond to their concerns without interruption. Prince William's calm but firm intervention helped transform the hostile confrontation into a more productive discussion. Officials began providing more specific information about housing availability and investigation progress. Residents were able to ask detailed questions and get clearer answers. By the end of the meeting, concrete commitments had been made about timelines for rehousing several families. Prince William also recognized that the Grenfell story was beginning to fade from public attention as other news events took over the headlines. He understood that continued media coverage was important for keeping pressure on officials to follow through on their promises to the community. He began giving interviews to major television networks and newspapers, but always focused these interviews on the ongoing needs of the Grenfell families, rather than on his own role in helping them. Part 6. Creating lasting change. Prince William understood that the Grenfell community needed much more than just immediate disaster relief and temporary housing solutions. The survivors required long-term support that would help them rebuild not only their physical lives, but also their sense of security, hope, and connection to the broader society. He knew that real healing would take years, not months, and that sustainable programs needed to be created to support families for as long as necessary. Working closely with local community leaders and established charitable organizations, Prince William helped develop several ongoing programs that would continue helping Grenfell families long after the initial emergency response had ended. These programs were designed based on direct input from the survivors themselves, rather than assumptions made by outside experts about what the community needed. One of the most successful initiatives was a comprehensive youth mentorship program that paired Grenfell teenagers with young professionals from various career fields. Many of the young people in the community had lost motivation for school and felt uncertain about their future prospects after experiencing such trauma at a crucial time in their educational development. Some teenagers had missed important exams or fallen behind in coursework because of the disruption to their lives. Prince William personally helped recruit mentors from his extensive network of contacts in business, education, healthcare, and other professional fields. He attended the program's monthly meetings whenever his schedule allowed and took genuine interest in the progress of individual participants. The mentors provided not only career guidance but also practical support with college applications, job interviews, and skill development. 17-year-old Maya had been planning to study medicine before the fire destroyed her confidence and disrupted her studies. Through the mentorship program, she was paired with Dr. Sarah Ahmed, a young physician who had grown up in a similar diverse London neighborhood. Dr. Ahmed helped Maya catch up on her science coursework and arranged for her to volunteer at a local clinic to gain medical experience. With this support and encouragement, Maya was able to get back on track with her educational goals. Prince William also supported the creation of a beautiful community memorial garden, where people could gather to remember those who had died in the fire and find peaceful space for reflection and healing. Unlike many memorial projects that are designed by architects and planners from outside the affected community, this garden was planned entirely by Grenfell residents themselves with input from survivors of all ages and backgrounds. The memorial garden planning process took nearly a year as community members met regularly to discuss what kind of space would be most meaningful and helpful for their ongoing healing. Prince William attended many of these planning meetings as a regular participant rather than as the leader. He offered suggestions when asked, but always deferred to the wishes and preferences of the people who would actually be using the space. The garden design included quiet areas for individual reflection, as well as open spaces where children could play safely while their parents found comfort in memorial sections. There were sections representing the different cultural backgrounds of the community with plants and design elements that reflected the diversity of people who had lived in Grenfell Tower. A central water feature provided soothing sounds that helped mask the noise of city traffic and created a sense of peace. Prince William also helped establish a comprehensive mental health support program that went far beyond the basic counseling services typically provided after disasters. This program included specialized therapy for children who had witnessed traumatic events, support groups for adults dealing with survivors' guilt, and family counseling to help households adjust to their new living situations and cope with ongoing stress. The mental health program was designed to be culturally sensitive and accessible to people from all the different ethnic and religious backgrounds represented in the Grenfell community. Counselors who spoke various languages were recruited and trained to work with families who were more comfortable discussing emotional issues in their native languages. Religious leaders from different faiths were also involved in providing spiritual support that respected diverse beliefs and practices. Prince William recognized that many Grenfell residents had lost not only their homes, but also their sense of economic security and career prospects. He helped create job training and small business development programs specifically for survivors who wanted to learn new skills or start their own enterprises. These programs provided practical training in fields like construction, food service, healthcare support, and childcare, where there were good employment opportunities in London. The job training programs were connected to actual employers who had committed to hiring program graduates. This meant that people completing the training had realistic prospects for finding stable employment, rather than just certificates that might not lead to actual jobs. Prince William used his business connections to recruit participating employers and personally vouched for the quality and commitment of the Grenfell program participants. Mrs. Fatima Hassan had worked as a seamstress before the fire, but lost all her equipment and client contacts when her apartment was destroyed. Through the Small Business Development Program, she received training in modern sewing techniques and help with obtaining new equipment and finding commercial space for a tailoring shop. Prince William attended the grand opening of her new business and became one of her first customers by commissioning alterations for his casual clothing. The success of these various programs created a model that other communities affected by disasters could learn from and adapt to their own situations. Prince William's approach of combining immediate compassionate response with long-term systematic support became a template for how public figures and charitable organizations could respond most effectively to community tragedies. Most importantly, these programs gave the Grenfell community tools and resources to become increasingly self-reliant and empowered over time. Rather than creating permanent dependency on outside help, the initiatives were designed to build local leadership and capacity that would continue benefiting the community for generations to come. Prince William's approach to helping the Grenfell community had effects that reached far beyond that one neighborhood in West London. His hands-on long-term commitment became a powerful example that influenced how other public figures approached their own charitable work and community involvement. The way he had shown up, consistently listened carefully, and treated everyone with dignity became a model that many others began to follow. Other members of the royal family started adopting similar approaches in their own charitable activities. Instead of making brief ceremonial visits to cut ribbons or give formal speeches, they began spending more time actually getting to know the people and communities they were trying to help. Princess Anne increased the time she spent at her equestrian therapy programs for disabled children. Prince Charles began making regular unannounced visits to his environmental projects to work alongside volunteers rather than just inspecting their progress. The change in royal family behavior was noticed by the British public and media. Newspaper articles began praising the more authentic and engaged approach that the royals were taking toward their charitable duties. People appreciated seeing their royal family members doing real work, rather than just attending fancy ceremonies. This shift helped improve public opinion about the value and relevance of the monarchy in modern British society. Prince William's example also inspired ordinary citizens across Britain to get more involved in helping their own local communities. Volunteer organizations throughout the country reported significant increases in membership applications and offers of help. Community centers saw more people showing up to offer assistance with local problems rather than just expecting government agencies to solve everything. In Manchester, a group of university students started a mentorship program for refugee children after reading about the success of the Grenfell Youth Program. They used Prince William's model of pairing young people with slightly older mentors who could provide both practical support and friendship. The program grew from helping 12 children in its first year to supporting over 200 young refugees within 3 years. A neighborhood in Birmingham created its own version of the Grenfell Memorial Garden after a local apartment fire displaced several families. Community members worked together to transform an empty lot into a peaceful space where people could gather for both remembrance and celebration. Like the Grenfell Garden, this space was designed entirely by local residents rather than outside professionals. Prince William's work also began influencing how local government officials approached community engagement throughout England. Many city councils and housing authorities realized that people were much more responsive to officials who took time to build genuine relationships rather than just making quick visits during crisis situations. The Liverpool City Council started implementing what they called Grenfell-style community meetings, where elected officials would spend entire evenings in different neighborhoods listening to residents' concerns and working together on solutions. Instead of formal town hall meetings with rigid agendas, these sessions were more like community conversations where everyone could participate equally. Several housing authorities across England began training their staff in the communication and relationship-building techniques that Prince William had demonstrated so effectively. Social workers and housing officers learned to spend more time listening to tenants' individual stories and circumstances rather than just processing paperwork and following bureaucratic procedures. The changes in government approach led to measurable improvements in community satisfaction and problem-solving effectiveness. Residents reported feeling more heard and respected by local authorities. Officials found that they could resolve conflicts and address issues more successfully when they took time to understand the human dimensions of problems, rather than just focusing on regulations and procedures. Prince William's influence also extended to the business community as wealthy individuals and corporations began adopting more engaged approaches to their charitable giving. Instead of just writing checks to large established charities, many donors started getting personally involved with grassroots organizations working directly with people in need. A group of London business leaders created a program that paired successful entrepreneurs with small business owners from disadvantaged communities. This program provided not only financial support, but also mentoring relationships that helped new businesses succeed in competitive markets. The business leaders credited Prince William's example with showing them how much more meaningful it was to develop personal connections with the people they were trying to help. The media coverage of Prince William's work with Grenfell also influenced public expectations about how leaders should respond to community crises. When other disasters or tragedies occurred, people began demanding the same kind of sustained personal engagement that Prince William had demonstrated. Politicians and other public figures found that they could no longer get away with making brief symbolic visits followed by empty promises. Educational institutions began incorporating Prince William's approach into their training programs for future social workers, teachers, healthcare providers, and public servants. Students learned about the importance of building trust through consistent presence, authentic listening, and genuine respect for the people they would be serving in their professional careers. The international impact was also significant as community organizations and government agencies in other countries studied the Grenfell response model. Disaster relief organizations began training their workers in the relationship-building techniques that had proved so effective in helping traumatized communities heal and rebuild. Perhaps most importantly, Prince William's example showed that creating positive change did not require having special powers or unlimited resources. What it required was showing up consistently, treating people with respect, and staying committed for as long as help was needed. This realization empowered many ordinary individuals to believe that they too could make meaningful differences in their communities. The ripple effect of hope that began with Prince William's first visit to Grenfell continued spreading outward in ways that would benefit communities and individuals for many years to come. His demonstration that authentic leadership during times of crisis could create lasting positive change became a legacy that inspired countless others to follow his example. Through his intensive work with the Grenfell community, Prince William himself was profoundly changed by the experience. The months he spent listening to survivors' stories, sharing in their struggles, and working alongside them to rebuild their lives taught him lessons that no amount of royal training or formal education could have provided. He often said privately that the people of Grenfell had taught him more about courage, resilience, and the true meaning of community than he had ever learned from books or lectures. Before the Grenfell experience, Prince William's charitable work had followed more traditional royal patterns. He would visit organizations, give speeches, present awards, and write checks to worthy causes. While these activities were helpful, they often felt somewhat distant and formal. The intense personal relationships he developed with Grenfell families showed him how much more meaningful and effective his work could be when it involved genuine human connections. Prince William became particularly close to several families and continued visiting them regularly, even years after the fire, when the immediate crisis had passed. These relationships evolved from disaster relief connections into genuine friendships based on mutual respect and affection. He attended wedding celebrations, birthday parties, graduation ceremonies, and other important family events, not as a royal patron, but as someone who truly cared about these people's lives and happiness. The Ramirez family had lost their grandfather in the fire and struggled with grief and financial hardship for months afterward. Prince William had spent many hours with them during the difficult early period, helping them navigate housing applications and connecting them with mental health support. When their eldest daughter Maria graduated from nursing school 3 years later, Prince William attended her graduation ceremony and celebration dinner with the extended family. During Maria's graduation celebration, Prince William gave a short speech in which he said that Maria represented the incredible strength and determination of the entire Grenfell community. He said that watching her overcome tragedy to achieve her dreams had inspired him to work harder in his own life and charitable activities. The family was deeply moved that someone of his position would take time to celebrate their personal achievement. Prince William's understanding of social inequality and systemic problems also deepened significantly through his Grenfell work. Before this experience, his knowledge of poverty and housing issues had been largely theoretical, based on briefings and reports, rather than direct personal observation. Living alongside families who were struggling with basic survival needs gave him a much more realistic understanding of how government policies and social systems actually affected real people. He began asking much tougher questions in his meetings with government officials and charity leaders about whether their programs were actually making meaningful differences in people's lives, or just providing good publicity for the organizations involved. He started demanding detailed information about outcomes and long-term impacts, rather than just accepting general statements about good intentions and impressive-sounding initiatives. Prince William's approach to all his other charitable commitments also evolved significantly. Instead of spreading his time across many different causes, he began focusing more intensively on fewer issues, where he could develop deeper expertise and more substantial relationships. He reduced the number of ceremonial appearances he made and increased the time he spent working directly with grassroots organizations. When Prince William visited homeless shelters, he would now spend entire days working alongside staff and volunteers rather than making brief tours. He learned to serve meals, clean facilities, and help with intake procedures for new residents. He discovered that many homeless individuals had fascinating life stories and valuable skills that had been overlooked by society because of their current circumstances. The prince also became much more aware of how his royal position could be used most effectively to help marginalized communities. He realized that his greatest power was not in making speeches or giving money, but in drawing public attention to important issues and putting pressure on officials to take action. He began using his media access much more strategically to highlight problems that might otherwise be ignored. Prince William started declining invitations to glamorous charity galas and fundraising events that were more about social networking among wealthy people than about actually helping those in need. Instead, he used his time to visit programs that were doing effective work with limited resources and to advocate for increased funding and support for these grassroots efforts. His family life was also influenced by his Grenfell experiences. Prince William began talking more with his own children about social responsibility and the importance of treating all people with respect, regardless of their economic circumstances. He wanted his children to understand from an early age that having privilege meant having an obligation to help others who were